Hi, in this session we will try to understand some initial things for Visual Studio, SQL Server, Microsoft SQL Server. And I've already shared another video on how to install SQL Server on your system. We can use SQL Express Edition. So when you have installed SQL Server, you can see all the services by using services.msc. And once you have the services, open the services screen, you can see on here that says SQL Server. If for some reason you have to restart a SQL Server service without restarting your system, you can just right click on here and click on restart, and that will basically restart the SQL service. Once SQL Server is restarted, we can then try from SQL Server Management Studio. We can try the SQL Server Management Studio to connect to that SQL Server. So let's say just type Management Studio, and you will get the SQL Server Management Studio up and running. By default, when you have installed SQL Server, you can just try to connect to the local host and use Windows authentication. Once it is connected, you can see all these nodes: database, security, service objects, replication, and all of them. So for the time being, we will just try to check one thing, that is on security. You can see on logins, this is the SA, that's the standard service trusted user login. So when you install by default, it's not going to be enabled. So you have to right click on this one and select properties. Here you can change the SQL Server SA password. If you want to enforce policy, then you can check this one. Otherwise, you can untick this section and you can just type any password. So let's say if I want to set up the password RACK, that's just a rack password. It's not going to ask you for any kind of password policy enforcement for this one. So you can just press OK, and here you go, your password is set. One more thing, sometimes you have to enable Windows authentication as well as SQL Server authentication. So you can go on here, click on properties, and then you can click on security, and here you can see that Windows authentication mode. If only Windows authentication mode is enabled, then it means that you will not be able to use SA password, SA user. So you have to select this SQL Server and Windows authentication if you want to use both. In our case, we will just try to use both. So we'll select this one. If you make any change on this one, I have not made any change yet, but if you have made any changes here, then you need to go to services or .msc and then restart the SQL service. Once that's done, now we can see, let's say if you want to create a new database, you can click on here and say new database, and let's say we create our database name as VMS, Vehicle Management Studio. You can see that's the data path that I have already set while installing my SQL Server. So I want all of my files to be on this one. Sometimes you can have your log files on a separate drive and your data files on a separate drive. If you want to, you can change this file from here, location from here, and then your SQL Server data files will be located on that folder in the drive that you have selected. So these are all the options. You can try to go to them, but I normally don't make any change here. So in general, when you click on create, you have this database. Once you have a database, what you can do is, as I selected the value for the folder location, that was the something. So we can go to drive D, And here you can see on data, and you can see that we have this VMS file here. Let's see if you want to attach or detach database. Like, you don't want to take a backup, you basically want to detach and attach the database. Very simple option, task, and then you can select detach. What detach will do, it has basically detached the database from here, but it has not deleted anything from the system. So you still have this file here. What you now can do is to attach a database, and now you need to select the data file basically to reattach it, and your database is back again. If you want to take backup of your database, you can right click on here and task and backup, and this is the location where your backup will be saved. And here you can select the recovery type, full, differential, or only transaction log. And here you can select the media. If you want to append backup on an existing backup, it means that you will have more than one backup files in a single backup. When you try to restore, system will ask you which backup you want to restore. And similarly here you have some backup options, so we will just try to leave everything as it is in the backup VMS. Okay, so when you I think, yeah, this part is not available. So what we can do, we can go to drive D, and we can create a new folder named backup. Now let's try to create this again. The backup is successful now, and we can see on our backup folder that we just created, we have a backup file. So if you want to restore this backup on any other version of SQL Server that is at least on the version that we have created a backup or higher, then you can restore the backup. Otherwise you cannot. So you cannot restore a backup for SQL Server 2016 to 2014, but you can restore a database of backup taken from SQL Server 2014 or 2012 or 2008 on SQL 2016 version. So once we have done backup, let's try to create a table. Let's create a new table. We call it we will call it vehicle. So this is the first column. Mostly the first column is your ID column. Normally that's what we do. You can select int or big int or whatever, and then we will set mileage integer, and similarly we can select, as we discussed, that we will be basically creating a system for vehicle auction, like a kind of a bidding website. So soon we will have a bidding website developed on which user can go and post all the vehicles, and then buyer can go and place bids on those vehicles. So let's create a couple of properties for that one. So when we try to create this kind of table, what you can do, or what probably you should do, is created by, that should be the user name. You can use ID for that one, and then you can have created date, And for this one, we will select DateTime. Now, let's say we want to set up the value of a column by default as something. So then what we can do, for example, what I'm saying is that whenever a record is created, I want to set the value of this column to be the current date and time, whatever that time. So that's the default value binding. By the way, in SQL Server, if you want to check what is current date, here you can click on the new query to open a new tab and make sure that this is where you can select the database. So your current database is selected. You can say select. GetDate is a function that tells you the date and time currently we have. So you can just copy this record and you can place this here. So now what will happen whenever you will create a record for the first time, this will be the default binding in this column. And you can add a column from here, insert simple column. So let's say we have engine size, ID, mileage, or we can add bid close time. And this is also DateTime value. Here we can set all these values as like allow null. If you want to allow these values to be nullable, then it's okay. If not, then you can change that. Finally, let's say we will create ID as a primary key. So we can set this value as a primary key. When you have set this value as primary key, you can specify the identity specification here, yes. If you say identity specification, it means that this column will be considered as identity column, and whenever you will create a record, SQL Server will automatically add a new ID in this column, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and this will tell you the identity, and this one is the seed value. So it will start from 1 and it will be incremented by 1. So when we save this one, you can name this table as vehicle. So now we will create another table where we want to save images in image information for that vehicle. So let's say we decide that for one vehicle we will allow user to post 9 images or 10 images or 5 images or whatever. So then obviously for one vehicle you have more than one images, it means it's one too many function. So we will create another table here, and we will set simply ID on that one. And because this table should have a link to original vehicle table, so you can set any name you want, but for like readability and easy access, we use the table name for which we are trying to link, and then the primary key of that table, and also obviously the same data type. And here we can, let's say that when we upload the picture, we want user to specify that this is my main image. So whenever you display the images, you have to show the main image on the top. So this can be our simple main image, and we want this as bit, and then we will have image name, and this here I would like to explain something about varchar and varchar and variable character and variable character. For variable, if you want to save information in multiple languages, then you should use n variable character. And let's say if you set the size of this column to characters 60 or 100, then whatever value you save in this one, it will take 60 characters or 60, whatever the size of 60 or 100 characters on the memory mapping, it will use that space. But if you use variable characters, it means that if you have reserved a space of 200 characters and you have used only 20 or 30, it will take the space of only 20 or 30 characters. But if you want to use, save multilingual characters, for example, in Norwegian or Danish or German or English, or maybe any other language, then you can specify n variable character. So we will set the image name. Now we have two options. Either we can save images in database, or we can save images on some kind of hard disk, and then we can use a reference path for that one. For in our system, we don't have this kind of security, or we don't need this kind of security to save images in the database. So we will try to save images somewhere on the database, on the hard disk. So let's set the image path if you want to save images on a different location. But if you have only one location where you are saving these images, then probably you can just don't set any image path and hard code it in your system. So let's hard code it. But as I said, we want to have proper auditing on every table. So we want to use this DateTime, and similarly modified by and now you can set this table name as vehicle image, and then we will set this table as a primary key, and again we will use the identity specification. Just double click here and yes, so we have now this. We want now user to place bid on those on these vehicles. So let's say that when user will try to place a bid, we will create another table for user bids, and then we will set up some kind of user ID and something in that. So for that one, I am now going to create a table, and vehicle ID will let you know that which vehicle is related to this bid, and then user ID will let us know which user could place the bid. Bid amount. Here you can specify that what is the maximum precision value that you want after the decimal point. So I have set that to 2, so that's our bid amount. And I believe we can easily copy and paste these columns. You can select them, copy, and then just paste here. So here you go, and then we can see vehicle bid. So this is how we can easily now create. We have created all these 3 tables now. So if we now want to add some kind of references between these tables, let's say that we now we want to add some kind of constraints or primary keys. We want to add a new foreign key. So primary key table vehicle image ID this, and let's change the foreign key name. So we are saying that that's the foreign key vehicle and vehicle image. And what about the table names? So primary key of vehicle table, and that is ID. That is going to be the foreign key in this one. So when you press save, you can see that here we have a foreign key. This is how you can basically attach the foreign key from one table to another table. Now let's try to add just a couple of records on the table manually. So we can click edit. Now we don't need to add anything in ID because we know that we have set that value as identity column. So engine size you can say like 3.2, mileage is 5,000, bid close date is, let's say, whatever date we want to put here, 2019, 12, and let's say 05, and then created by created date, leave them as null for now. So the moment you press down arrow, it will create a new record. Then the next one we can say 2.2, mileage is 6598, and then probably 2019, 12, and 6. So you can basically just execute Sql again, and then you can see that here we have ID and these values. Now if you want to create a stop seizure, let's say we want to, no, let's add an image of a vehicle first. So you can say vehicle ID 1 is main image, true, image name, and then vehicle 1 false, vehicle 1. And similarly vehicle 2. So now we have created basically 2 images for one vehicle, 2 images for another vehicle, and then we have created 2 separate vehicles as well. Now let's try to see how can we run the query. So select start from vehicle. Like here you can see this red underline, so you can press Ctrl Shift R. That will basically refresh the cache on SQL Server, and then that is gone, and now your IntelliSense will be working fine. So here you can see that the create date does have a default value that we have added already, and now we can see select start from vehicle image, and you can see that we have these 4 images. For example, if we are going to write a query this way, select start from vehicle as v join vehicle image as vi on v dot id equals vi dot vehicle id. So what will we get? You can select any row and then run. Now we have these in this information. What if we want to display v dot id vehicle id v dot engine size v dot mileage and v dot bid close time, and now we want to show the image name rather than showing something else. So then we can say vi dot is main image vi dot image name. Let's see how we can see this one. So this is basically, you have just written a query that can give you this information. Now what you can do now let's say if we want to have some kind of a view in which we only want to display this information and like a pre-written query. So easiest way for that one is to basically write a new view, and somehow I'm not to create a view right now, so we can use the designer later, but right now we can write a query to create a view, and that's what we can easily do. So we'll just close this one. New view, and here we can select from these tables whichever we want to include. So this one and image this one, and close. And here we can select the column name or whatever alias we want to. But if you want to use a script, then it's gonna be quite easy. It's not that difficult. So you can basically say create view as vehicle info as, and then select start from as v join vehicle image as vi on v dot id equals vi dot vehicle id. What if we just run this one and see all the columns? So here we can say v dot id as vehicle id. This is called column alias, and then v dot engine size we don't need alias for this one. V dot mileage, V dot build close date time, V dot is main image, and vi dot image name, and here we can put the vehicle created date time, v dot create date time, and probably that's it. Just to probably increase of how can you view it properly. That's it. So when you click create new, then it's going to create a new vehicle info view, and if you refresh your filter here, you can see this vehicle view. Now if you want to use information, basically view is just a kind of a temporary table that is created for you, and it's created at runtime. It does not exist all the time. It's just the information that is exist. So here you can say select star from VW vehicle info, and as usual Control Shift R, and it will refresh the cache. So VW, oops, that's wrong. So here you go, that's your stroke seizure. Now what is, sorry, this was a view. So what if, how can you create a new stroke seizure? Let's create a new stroke seizure, and you can just, what you can do, you can basically use any command or parameter information or anything. Let's say we want to use a stop procedure, and we want to say that we only want to view the information of about only the one vehicle that we want to pass on. So we can say get vehicle info, and here we can pass on some information about the parameters. So we can say that vehicle ID int, and it is required. And what we can now do, we can write any kind of query here. If you want to do some kind of insertion, updation, or deletion, we can write any kind of query here. But let's say we want to just fetch the information for that vehicle. So we'll select star from VW vehicle info, where vehicle ID equals vehicle ID. So this parameter will be passed up here, and the system will run the query and give you the results. So when you click on execute, this stop procedure is created in the system. And here you can see that's the stop procedure that you have now. So if you now want to run this stop procedure, what you can do is you have to write exe get vehicle info, and then you can pass the vehicle ID. So this is basically returning you the vehicle ID. But as I said, when we run this stop procedure, it is returning us all the image, like the vehicle information with all these images as well. So if you have 9 images, you will get this information 9 times. If you change your store procedure, what you can do is you can go here and modify, and rather than picking up the information from the view, you can just start that information here, and obviously we will not have this value, and we can say where v dot id equals vehicle id. So make sure that you have Ultra here, only then you will be able to run this query. So now if we want to rerun this, you will get the information about that single vehicle. So in our upcoming lectures, discussions, we will try to study about functions, singular value, scalar functions, and then tabular functions that can give us some kind of return value in a tabular format, or this one will return some values to in simple scalar format. Okay, so have a nice day.